Hey everyone, welcome back to the lab. In this video, we're going to be talking about DigitalOcean App Platform and comparing its pricing to Google Cloud Run for 2024. So I've primarily used Google Cloud Run to host my sites for the past few years. I'm a big fan of platform as a service, PaaS, I guess we could call it, managed container hosting, and Cloud Run has proven to be very reliable and easy to use for my low traffic purposes. In fact, I run this site on it for about $1 a month. Now, I recently calculated Google Cloud Run prices per month and was surprised to find out how expensive it is when used in an always-on configuration. I was curious about how this compared to other PaaS providers, so in this post, we'll be comparing Google Cloud Run prices with that of DigitalOcean's App Platform. Comparing PaaS services. So Google Cloud Run and DigitalOcean App Platform are relatively similar PaaS offerings, which makes them a good fit for comparison. They both provide a managed container service that allows you to ship your code as a container and configure how it will be run on the platform. That said, there are some differences to call out here. In particular, we're kind of comparing a smaller, simpler cloud versus like a more fully featured cloud from one of the big three, GCP. But here's some of the ones that I think are most important for us comparing these prices and understanding the offerings. So the first is that Cloud Run is offering way more configuration options, everything from like CPU to RAM to region. And now DO does offer these options, just not as many. And this is one of the reasons why Cloud Run and Google Cloud in general is so hard to understand pricing wise, because there's so many options and every option has a different price. So getting them all together into a total is much harder. The second is that Cloud Run offers scale to zero and auto scaling out of the box. So it gives you like much more of a kind of serverless experience, even though, both of these and really most PaaS are what we would consider a serverless offering. But when we're thinking of like serverless functions that can scale to zero or scale to infinity, that's not ever actually true, Cloud Run is much closer to that. If you look at App Platform, scaling exists, but it's much more manual, and it doesn't have scale to zero, which to be fair is actually common. Like Azure doesn't have scale to zero, AWS Fargate doesn't have scale to zero currently, but just something to call out. And the last thing to call out is maybe not a difference, but it's a potential difference. Both of them use the idea of vCPUs, which in most cases means you're on a shared machine. And this means that you could have a noisy neighbor problem. It seems like most of these implementations use similar versions of vCPU, but it's hard to totally tell if each platform's definition of CPU is the same. And so we're going to be comparing them as if they're the same kind of shared core vCPU, but there is a possibility that they're just not. So those are the main differences to kind of, keep in mind as we go into pricing. All right, onto Cloud Run versus App Platform pricing. So in my previous post, we crunched the numbers to get Cloud Run pricing per month. For this comparison, we're going to be reusing several assumptions to make these calculations easier to compare and hopefully more generalizable to more use cases. So the first thing is we're going to just assume that free tier and discounts don't exist. This is because, after your first app, you will probably run out of credits or whatever the free allotment is. And so this gives us a better idea of what an actual cost of an instance would be. So you can kind of do your own calculations and scale that up to your own workload. The next is we're going to assume requests and transfer payloads are free. This is like basically never the case, but this would be a lot more complicated and is a lot more dependent on the specific workload you're doing. So we're just going to leave it alone as now. The next is we're going to be assuming that these compute resources are on for the full month. And this is basically how most clouds work anyway. You kind of buy a set amount of allocation and then it might scale up if you need more, but it will never go to zero. So Cloud Run is actually special with that scale to zero thing, which gives it a few superpowers. But for our use cases, we're just going to assume it's on for the full month so that we can actually compare the resources and price. Okay, the next thing is we're only going to be comparing against GCP Cloud Run always allocated in tier 1. This is the cheapest price option and thus the most comparable. And this is also going to keep us from having to do all sorts of combinatorial like comparisons because there's so many different options in GCP that can make the price vary wildly. So we're just going for the cheapest option. Just know that this is the cheapest option, and so the other options you take will be more expensive. And then of course just note that I'm doing these figures on January 1st 2024, so the prices might change, so just always keep that in mind and check out the pricing page if those are changed. All right, with those assumptions, we can compare pricing for available standard configurations. And so here I've got a little spreadsheet here. And I went ahead and calculated it for the Google Cloud Run always on and on demand. Basically, on demand is always more expensive than always on. And then for tier 1 and tier 2, tier 1 is always cheaper than tier 2. And so these are the two we're going to be comparing here because this is Google Cloud Run's cheapest available option. And these are all a bit more expensive. And so the versions that we're comparing is basically the versions available on DigitalOcean for the App Platform Professional tier. And this is most similar because it gives you basically all the basic things that App Platform has, and then it really only gives you 4 different configurations per instance. And so that's what we'll be comparing. And so all the calculations are here, but I pulled out the big ones that we're comparing. And so the first is for 1 vCPU and half a gigabyte of RAM. DO is going to cost you about $5. This is on the basic tier because there is no professional here, but this is here. And for GCP Cloud Run, this is going to cost you about $50, which is about 9 times more expensive for the same amount of server, if you will. For 1 vCPU and 1 gigabyte RAM, DigitalOcean is going to run you about $12, and GCP Cloud Run is going to cost about $52, which is about 4 times more expensive. For 1 vCPU and 2 gigabytes of RAM, DO is going to cost you about $25, and GCP is going to cost you about $57, which is about 2 times more expensive. And then finally, for 2 CPUs and 4 gigabytes RAM, DO is going to cost you about $50 a month, and then GCP Cloud Run is going to cost about $115, which is again a little bit more than 2x expensive. All right, so the next thing you're probably wondering is like, well, how do I pick between, App Platform and Cloud Run? Now from these numbers, it's pretty clear that, Google Cloud Run comes out to about 2 times more expensive for these small platform as a service servers. The pricing does change a bit when you get into like the more super large servers, like we're talking like the 64 gigabytes of RAM and like the 816 cores. But this is mostly what you're going to be running, and these are really the only options on App Platform for shared core. And so the question is like, does that mean you should switch? And I think the answer here is like, it always really depends. But here's kind of like the way I'm thinking about it right now. So I've personally been able to host several small side projects and this website on Cloud Run for less than $10 a year because my sites don't get that much traffic. This means that they can leverage Cloud Run's scale to zero feature to sleep when they aren't doing anything, which makes it very cheap to run. Now, if I tried to do the same thing on App Platform, I'd be paying $5 a month for each of these, even if they didn't get any traffic. So it's very clear here that like even though App Platform comes out to be like way cheaper for the same server, because it's always on, you might end up paying for a lot of these hours and seconds that you're not actually using. You don't actually need that stuff. And so for me, I have about 6 different projects that are active right now, aside from my website, that have been running for many months, some of them several years. And I basically pay like pennies for those every year because they don't really get any traffic anymore, but they're still alive. And so I like that because I have a long backlog of my projects and it's cool for people to be able to click in and it's like not dead. But I also don't pay for it, so I don't feel like I'm losing anything. It's only there when people want it. Now that said, if my sites were to get more traffic and require Cloud Run to provision servers for longer, it is clear that I'd be paying quite a bit more for the same amount of compute. And so I think for sites where you have enough traffic or enough load that your thing is doing work all the time and you are going to need a server on all the time, then App Platform becomes very attractive. But if you're kind of like spiky about it, even if like you have huge load but it's spiky, it seems like Cloud Run and its auto scaling is probably a better fit for that. Next. Personally, I think I'll be sticking with Cloud Run for my existing projects as there's no real reason for me to switch right now. And, switching has a lot of overhead. It's a lot of work. And so like before you do a refactor, you should probably understand like, do I need this? And for me right now, no, it's working fine. For this stuff, I pay less than $1 a month, which is just, it's worth it. But for new projects, especially those I hope to scale into small businesses, I think I'll probably explore a bit more of what DO has to offer, just to kind of understand more about its offerings, see its kind of what it's good at, what its shortcomings are, so I can make a better, more informed decision in projects down the road. Now, if you like this post, you might also like why I'm moving from SvelteKit to F#, kind of comparing my journey of how I build and scale apps and how I'm kind of thinking differently from how I was the previous few years and how I'm looking forward. You can also take a look at Cloud Seed Quick Start, which is how I build full stack F# apps, and basically how I start all my projects nowadays. And then finally, you might be interested in my journey from software engineer to entrepreneur and back again, talking a little bit about my career, the things I'm building, and how I kind of decided where I want to go for the next few years. That's it for this video. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.